RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
You will absolutely accept the result of this election.
I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
There's no question, whether it be in the state of Indiana or in states around the country, that in recent years we've had proven instances of voter fraud.
The final 2 weeks now before Election Day here in Indiana and all across the country, and the focus is now squarely on allegations of voter fraud in the Hoosier state and the Trump talk of a rigged election. Thank you so much for joining us. Now just 16 days until Election Day, and an extraordinary week again where the traditional campaigns have given way to the talk of fraud and that a presidential candidate may not accept the results come November 8th. Let's start with that voter registration fraud investigation here in Indiana. It has covered 56 of the state's 92 counties. Secretary of State Connie Lawson announced that her office has found potentially thousands of registrations that had the voter's name or birth date changed improperly, meaning those voters wouldn't show up on voter rolls. Lawson's office turning that information over to state police for more investigation.
We are confident that the system has not been hacked. Again, we believe that the majority of these changes have come from paper registration applications that have been turned into the county offices.
Do you believe there's been criminal activity here? Do you believe this is voter registration fraud?
It's just more than I want to suppose. You know, I just don't want to jump to any conclusions. I don't want to suppose about anything, but at the same time, I don't want any voters to be disenfranchised. So we felt like it was prudent to ask voters to use that caution one more time, check their voter registration record on IndianaVoters.com.
State Police Superintendent Doug Carter issued a fiery statement in defense of their investigation, including a raid on the Indiana Voter Registration Project's headquarters there on Meridian Street earlier this month. Carter says any suggestion the investigation began at the direction of Governor Pence is false and offensive to him and every state trooper. State Democrats, meanwhile, are calling foul, accusing the Secretary of State of causing voter confusion and attempting to suppress votes. Let's bring in Rafael Sanchez, who's working that part of the story for us. Rafael.
Jason, supporters of the Secretary of State, Connie Lawson, say it's ridiculous to question her integrity. But state Democratic Party leaders are highly upset that Lawson would suggest potential fraud before the state police investigation is concluded. The Secretary of State turned over her concerns to state police, which now have more than 24 troopers in 54 counties. The party believes this situation may discourage Hoosiers from believing that their vote will count. And on that issue, they did not hold back.
It is a move that reeks of incompetence and partisanship and appears to be an attempt to create confusion and gridlock to deter Hoosier voters from taking part in our political process.
The state Democratic Party says it is not connected to Patriot Majority USA. That's the liberal leading group being accused of possible voter registration tampering, which it also denies. The Patriot group has also called for the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate this situation.
Rafael, what is the state Democratic Party saying about the state police investigation?
The party says it supports the process and believes any violations should be prosecuted. The party says it supports the process and believes that, again, the state police should be involved.
We're going to respect what happens as a result of an investigation. Certainly, I mean, we don't have any thought that that investigation should not happen, right?
Any confirmed acts of wrongdoing or violations of state election law need to be dealt with accordingly by proper authorities, period.
And so, Jason, that is the latest on this developing story.
Rafael, thank you so much for continuing to follow that. Meanwhile, Governor Mike Pence also made his first comments on the investigation this week during a campaign stop in Nevada, one day after his running mate answered questions about the election results in the presidential debate.
Let me tell you this, don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. Voter fraud is real. In my own state, my own state of Indiana, Our state police just recently uncovered intentional acts of voter fraud that were perpetrated by a PAC established by your very own Senator Harry Reid called the Patriot Majority USA.
And we want to welcome in Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter. Now, thank you so much for being here. Great to see you as always.
Thank you.
Governor Pence says that there is voter fraud in Indiana. Is that the case?
I think it is. I think it is. I think that the vast majority of our citizenry around Indiana would expect us to do a very objective, very complete and very conclusive investigation, and that's exactly what's happening, Jason.
This is an investigation, of course, that is ongoing. You can only say so much at this point. Is there intentional criminal activity going on? Is it simply sloppy paperwork that we have seen, or aren't you able to talk about that?
It could be a combination of both of those. It's way too early to speculate. That's what's happening. That's what's gotten this a bit upside down. Is a speculation based on subjective opinion, and that comes to a conclusion. And I'm not going to do that.
Talk about the state police effort right now. What's taking place across the state?
We have almost 24 detectives working on this full time. It's our goal that nobody is disenfranchised, that nobody is left behind. And I look at this from an optimistic viewpoint, Jason, and I think that this has given everybody an opportunity to validate the data that's currently in the system that allows them to ensure they get to the correct polling place with the correct information, and they're able to do what very few people around the globe can do, and that's vote in a democracy. That's our goal. And any inference any other way or for any other reason is simply false.
We had heard from the state Democratic Party. They're saying that they support this investigation, yet they are concerned about the potential suppression of votes come Election Day. Should voters not be worried about that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If there are improper names or dates of birth or addresses for places that don't exist, for people that don't exist, or otherwise altered unbeknownst to the person that should be entitled to vote, wouldn't the citizenry expect us to do what we're doing? I think the answer to the question is yes, they would.
Talk about your work with Terry Curry at this point.
Yes, Terry's been a great partner in this process. I've talked to him. I talked to him last night. I talked to him again this morning. He'll come out with a statement sometime next week. He's the elected prosecutor of the County of Marion, and he's made it very clear, not only with this case, but he's a man of integrity, with multiple other ones, that if you violate a statute and commit a crime in the County of Marion, you'll be prosecuted. There's no exemption here.
Election Day is not very far away at this point. What's the state police timeline going forward?
We're not going to tie our timeline to a political process. We're going to tie our timeline to the time it takes to objectively, accurately determine what's occurred here, if anything. If it has, then we'll proceed into the system with arrest warrants, search warrants, and people will be held accountable.
For voters that are watching right now, Republicans, Democrats, undecided voters, voters who could vote for a mix of those, yes, what do you want them to know going into currently early voting and, of course, Election Day on November 8th?
Well, number one, it's easy to hear or collect certain pieces and parts and come up with an opinion. I would ask you to please not do that. What I would ask you to do, though, is get online, check to make sure that your data is correct, and go vote on Election Day. If it's not correct, then contact the local election board and make sure that the information is corrected. If you suspect something is wrong, let us know.
Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time and the ongoing investigation. Yeah. Meanwhile, after a quick break right here, not necessarily honoring the outcome, Donald Trump's doubled down on whether he'll respect the election results. His Indiana campaign vice chair joins us next here on Indianapolis This Week.
That I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. Those comments from Donald Trump sent shockwaves across the country and raised questions about how he will respond if he should lose on November 8th. Our Katie Hines is with one of the top officials of Trump's Indiana campaign.
We're joined now by Tony Samuel. He is the vice chair of the Indiana Trump-Pence campaign, also communications director. Tony, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
We appreciate it. What did Donald Trump mean when he said that he will only accept the results of the election if he wins?
I think he was joking a little bit. When he said that, he was kind of poking fun at all of the media hysteria that happened the night before when he answered the question and everybody jumped on, oh, he's doing something untraditional. Really what he is saying is that he reserves the right to look at the results and challenge the results if they need to be challenged, if there is funny business going on. This is nothing, every situation is different, but if you remember back in 2000, and I was a part of the Indiana team that went down to Florida to watch the recounts going on, but both Al Gore and George Bush questioned the results, so we had to take another month and get it right. In 2004, Howard Dean challenged or at least he criticized the results in Ohio. So this is nothing new. If you're going to be concerned about the irregularities and some of the questionable voting that's going on in the early stages, possible voter fraud, to investigations by the Indiana State Police here in Indiana, then you wouldn't say, oh, but whatever happens, happens, and I'll accept it. You would say what he said, that, you know, we'll wait and see what happens, and if we need to challenge anything legally, there's a process to do that.
An important distinguishing factor, though, from 2000, those results and the validity, the integrity of the election was not questioned 3-4 weeks out ahead of time.
Right. But we are seeing irregularities, and we're hearing about voters that are voting illegally in states around the country. So why wait until it's over? It could be too late then. So you want to question it. You want to draw attention to it. You know, Project Veritas has released some videotapes that show folks hired by the Democrat Party, maybe they're contractors or subcontractors, but ties back to the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign, that are out there scheming to defraud the election, to get folks that are not registered to vote in Indiana to do so. So whether this can be proven or not at this stage, there are people out there caught on videotape saying that they're trying to do this. So you would question it, you would watch it, you would do it you know, legally with the election officials, work with them, and you would then reserve the right to challenge it. You know, might not be widespread across every state, but if it's happening in one critical state that could tip the scale, you would definitely want to watch that and reserve the right to challenge that. Mr.
Trump has said that he will accept a clear result. What is defined as clear?
If he wins, no. You know, if there's no cases of this kind of fraud and deception, we'll have to wait and see what that means. But, you know, hopefully everything is above board. But, you know, at this stage, it's just the smart and wise thing to do, to draw attention to it and to let it be known that we're watching for this kind of thing, because we see that it's, you know, people are scheming to do this kind of thing. So I think it's the smart move and the right thing to do.
Are there risks, though, Tony, with him making these statements now, potentially calling the entire democratic process into question at this juncture? I
don't think it's calling the democratic process into question. What happens if there is a legal challenge, which is, you know, the way that it's supposed to work and the way that it can work, there's a process for this. That is part of the democratic process also. When we were in Florida and we had to go through and do recounts, that was part of the democratic process. This is all, you know, part of the way that it should be. Another, you know, thing that I should mention, we're traveling the state. We're talking, Rex earlier, our state chairman, Susie Jaworowski, our state director, and myself are traveling the state. We've been to almost 30 counties. This is the kind of thing we're hearing about from people.
Our thanks to you both. Meanwhile, Indiana Congressman and former Indiana Secretary of State Todd Rokita suggested that Donald Trump is right to wait to see the election results after telling us last week there's no way the election could be rigged. In a statement to us, Rokita says Al Gore didn't initially accept the results of the 2000 election, and this was his right initially. America has lived through the 2000 election in Florida with its irregularities, and now in 2016 we see evidence of voter registration fraud in places right here in Indiana, and videos that expose organized Democratic efforts to have people vote in states other than those in which they live. So it's understandable that any candidate for public office at any level and associated with any party would be concerned and want to reserve their rights under our state's election laws to challenge a close election. Our Beth Vaughn also had the chance to ask that question of Indiana Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly.
The idea that Donald Trump is now saying the election has been rigged against him, your reaction to that, and is that even a possibility?
There's absolutely no evidence of that at all. I played a lot of sports, I coached a lot of sports, and when I was in a position where my team was losing or, you know, had just lost, I shook the hands of whoever won and congratulated them and tried to do better next time. And so there's no evidence of any rigged election, any voter fraud. I have enormous confidence in our election officials who work so hard all across our state in every county to ensure the integrity of the vote, and I know they're going to do the same on Election Day.
And next up, our political insiders break down how everything this week could impact Election Day. Now roughly 2 weeks away. Their take next here on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We want to welcome in our political insiders now, including my favorite bad hombre, Mary Beth Schneider here.
Oh, no, I'm the nasty woman.
You are the nasty woman.
They're the bad hombres.
For the Republican and Adam Kirsch for the Democrats. We have heard a lot, we have talked a lot about this ongoing investigation and the potential of voter fraud here in Indiana. Mary Beth, let's start with you. What are the politics behind this, if any?
Well, there's a whole lot of politics behind voter fraud because of both Donald Trump raising this as an issue, saying the election is rigged and watch out for fraud, and telling some of his supporters to go into inner city areas to watch for it. It's also been an issue because Democrats have filed challenges in states against some of the voter ID and polling place restrictions. North Carolina federal court intervened. So it's got so much import coming into this election that you say the words voter fraud and red flags go off.
Pete, Democrats have called this a way to suppress the vote come November 8th. Is that true?
Yeah, it's a complete joke because the day before, the Democrats put out what I thought was a very reasonable statement saying we need to monitor the situation and ensure the Secretary of State ensures the integrity of our elections. But then they realized, oh, hey, maybe we could politicize this. So we'll put out our communications director behind a podium and just go wild and crazy against the Secretary of State, Connie Lawson, who is one of the most respected people in state government. I don't think anyone has ever looked at Connie Lawson and thought conspiracy. I mean, she is there to protect the integrity of our elections. Democrats who have former county chairmen in jail because of fraud are the ones who are worried about this.
It's cute that you want to go about former county chairman because Connie Lawson literally got the job as Secretary of State because her predecessor was convicted of voter fraud. Republicans, at the very least, are overstepping when they're saying this is widespread allegations of fraud. What we're seeing is the Republican elections chair in the House say there is no widespread fraud here. There's just clerical errors. There's some things going on that always happen. And it was wrong of Secretary Lawson to run out and say fraud, and that's why she ended up backpedaling it a little bit this week.
Let's talk about Donald Trump in the context of all this. He had talked about the possibility of a rigged election and had brought that up, and then it really escalated over the past few days when he started talking about voter fraud. You heard from Mike Pence earlier. Are you surprised that more Republicans haven't pushed back harder against Donald Trump's statement that he might not respect the results of the election, whether or not he wins?
Actually, I've been pleased by those who have pushed back. Jeff Flake called this, he's a Republican senator from Arizona, called it beyond the pale. It absolutely is. It is just, Chris Wallace, the moderator that night, said it actually right, that this is a great American tradition. It reassures everybody, both the United States and in the world, that we have a peaceful transition of power. It's always, for me, one of the most emotional moments in politics when the loser is gracious and concedes and government goes on. And for Donald Trump, I don't care whether you're joking or serious, you don't say that.
Adam, should Trump have done less? Should Republicans do more?
Yes, on both fronts. Donald Trump should absolutely say, I would honor the results of the election. He's sort of trying to get to, I'll honor it if I win, which is somehow, I think, worse. And I think Republicans who haven't denounced him, who are continuing to support him, such as Todd Young and Eric Holcomb, need to come out and say that they will honor the results of their election, if not their standard bearer and the leader of their party.
Pete?
It's interesting because every time Donald Trump says something some people don't agree with, they expect the Republican cavalry to denounce him. Yet on the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton has engaged in practically criminal behavior with her email, and no one is asking people to denounce her. We just kind of act like it never happened. But every time Donald Trump speaks, we want, Jeff Flake, who's pretty consistent about coming out against Trump, but we want every Republican to say horrible things about the guy. It's such a double standard.
The exciting news for all of us is that Election Day is roughly 2 weeks away, and that means that the end of political ads are also roughly 2 weeks away. And I think we're all on board with saying that we're excited about that and just fine with that right now. With 2 weeks to go, how do you anticipate the presidential election and campaign playing out, Mary Beth?
There is absolutely no telling what Donald Trump to do. And there is a different standard for Donald Trump because Donald Trump says far more outrageous things than any candidate ever in the history of mankind, I think. I've never seen anything like this.
Difference between words and deeds, and she did criminal things.
No, she has not done criminal things because they have not been charged with a criminal act.
Yet.
Oh, Pete, come on. Now, this is what we expect, I guess, for the last 2 weeks, and it's too bad. I do think you're going to see Hillary Clinton trying to pivot to a more inclusive message, trying to reassure people that as president, she'd be the president. Everybody has seen a little of that. I expect to have more of an uplifting message. I guess I would hope Donald Trump would do the same, but I have very little hope for Donald Trump to ever go for uplifting.
Pete is our resident Republican. The impact of Donald Trump's chances on November 8th and the potential impact that it has for the down-ballot Republicans.
Well, I think it's going to be different in every district in every state around the country. I think Donald Trump, he's dipped a little here, but he's coming back up. I think he's going to win Indiana by a pretty comfortable margin, but that won't be the case in some other states, and it's going to be different. But what's interesting, though, is when those dips happen, it hasn't really hurt the down-ballot Republicans as much as people think it would. Yeah. They, in some cases, have distanced themselves, or voters are discerning enough to say, okay, well, they're not Donald Trump, so they're not tagged that way.
Adam, you get the final last line on this. How are Democrats feeling now, right now with 2 weeks to go?
I think cautious optimism is where Democrats are right now, statewide and around the country. I think the problem for Republicans is right now you are seeing people who are lifelong Republicans refusing to say they're Republicans, and that's the lasting effect for Trump on the Republican Party.
Adam Kirsch gets the last word. He filibustered marvelously. Adam Kirsch, Pete Seat, Mary Beth Schneider, thank you for being here. Of course, we'd love for you to follow us on social media at our new Facebook page there, and of course on Twitter. We promise news and updates every day of the week. We'll be right back. To Indianapolis this week, we want to remind you that you have one more chance to hear from the candidates for governor of Indiana. Eric Holcomb, John Gregg, and Rex Bell will all share the stage a final time. That debate is set for Tuesday night in Evansville at 7 p.m., and you can watch that live through our RTV6 app and on Facebook through the RTV6 page. Thank you so much for joining us here on Indianapolis this week. For Raphael, Katie, and our entire team here, have a fantastic Sunday, everybody.